Hello and welcome to MRCPsych on the Go Revision Essentials. My name is Dr. Alapa Surlicker and I'm a psychiatry trainee in the west of Scotland. Like many of you, I spent a lot of time commuting. This was valuable time that I could have spent revising for the MRCPsych examination. And so, I've started this podcast to help you revise on the go. Each episode breaks down one high-yield topic mapped to the syllabus. This is then followed by 5 questions to help reinforce your learning. So, grab your headphones, turn travel time into revision time, and let's get started. Have you ever noticed that your heart starts pounding before you feel afraid? You hear a loud bang. Your body tenses, your pulse races, and then, a moment later, the fear arrives. This sequence might seem trivial, but it sits at the heart of one of the oldest debates in psychology. Does the body create the emotion, or does the emotion drive the body? In this episode, we begin a 4-part series on emotion. We start by asking what an emotion actually is, and then we examine the theory that dared to reverse our common sense assumptions. Emotions are complex, multi-component experiences. They are not simply feelings. They involve coordinated changes across several different systems simultaneously. Psychologists typically describe 4 components of emotional response. The first component is the physiological component. This refers to the bodily changes that accompany emotion. These include changes in heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, sweating, and hormonal release. Many of these changes are mediated by the autonomic nervous system, particularly the sympathetic branch. The second component is the cognitive component. This refers to the thoughts and interpretations associated with the emotional experience. How we think about a situation shapes what emotion we feel. The same event can produce very different emotions depending on how it is interpreted. The third component is the behavioural component. This refers to the expressive and action-oriented aspects of emotion. Facial expressions, body posture, and vocal tone are all part of the emotional response. The final and fourth component is the subjective component. This refers to the conscious, felt experience of the emotion. This is what we typically mean when we say we feel happy, sad, anxious, or angry. Remember, emotional responses have 4 components: physiological, cognitive, behavioural, and subjective. To understand where this debate began, we need to go back to 1884. William James, an American philosopher and psychologist, published a paper asking a deceptively simple question: what is an emotion? William James was a remarkable figure. He was the elder brother of the novelist Henry James. He suffered from severe depression and ill health throughout much of his 20s. He later described himself as having arrived at his theories through his own first-hand experience of emotional suffering. His 1890 textbook, The Principles of Psychology, became one of the most influential works in the history of the discipline. Around the same time, and entirely independently, a Danish physiologist named James-Lange arrived at a strikingly similar conclusion. Lange published his own account in 1885. Together, their ideas became known as the James-Lange theory of emotion. The common sense view of emotion runs like this: we see a bear, we feel afraid, we run. James and Lange proposed the opposite, and to explain it, James reached for an example that has become one of the most famous in the world of psychology: the bear in the woods. Picture the scene. You're walking in the woods and you spot a grizzly bear. Your heart races. your palms sweat. Your legs carry you away before you have even decided to move. Then, as you run, you notice your body shaking. Your palms are sweaty, knees weak, arms are heavy. And it is only at that moment that your brain draws the conclusion, I must be afraid. The mantra of the James-Lange theory is this: I am trembling, therefore I am afraid, not the other way around. They argued that if you stripped away all the bodily sensations from an emotion, nothing would remain. What is grief without the heaviness in the chest? What is joy without the lightness and the quickening pulse? Remember, the James-Lange theory proposes that emotions arise from the perception of physiological changes in the body. Bodily changes come first. The emotional feeling follows. A useful way to remember this for the exam is to think about the L in Lange. L stands for lag. The emotion lags behind the body. The body changes first, and the feeling catches up. Several lines of evidence have been cited in support of the James-Lange theory. First, physiological arousal does influence emotional experience. Adrenaline injections have been shown to intensify emotional reactions. This is consistent with the idea that bodily states contribute to felt emotion. Second, manipulating facial expressions can alter emotional experience. Studies have shown that holding a pen between the teeth, which activates the muscles used in smiling, can increase amusement ratings when watching cartoons. This is the facial feedback hypothesis. It suggests that feedback from the body does influence the quality of emotional experience, just as James-Lange theory proposed. Third, research on embodied cognition supports the idea that the body shapes emotion. Posture, movement, and physical states influence mood and emotional perception. For example, adopting an upright, expansive posture has been associated with increases in confidence and positive effect. Remember, evidence for the James-Lange theory includes the influence of adrenaline on emotional intensity, the facial feedback hypothesis, and research on embodied cognition. Despite its influence, the James-Lange theory has attracted serious criticism. These criticisms were developed most forcefully by the physiologist Walter Cannon, whose alternative theory we will explore in the next episode. The key problem is specificity. Fear, anger, excitement, and anxiety all produce similar patterns of sympathetic visceral arousal. If emotion is simply the perception of bodily change, how do we tell them apart? There is also the problem of speed. We feel emotions almost instantaneously, but physiological responses in the viscera develop over seconds. The body seems too slow to be the source of the emotion. Additionally, artificially inducing physiological arousal does not reliably produce genuine emotion. When participants are injected with adrenaline, they describe feeling as if they were afraid rather than truly afraid. This suggests that bodily arousal alone is not sufficient to generate a full emotional experience. Finally, studies of people with spinal cord injuries who have reduced feedback from the body do not show a consistent reduction in emotional experience. This challenges the claim that visceral feedback is necessary for emotion at all. The James-Lange theory has several areas of clinical relevance. First, it helps explain why patients with anxiety disorders often present with prominent physical symptoms. Palpitations, breathlessness, and dizziness are visceral changes that can themselves intensify the experience of fear. This creates a cycle in which physical sensations amplify the emotional experience, which then generates further physical symptoms. This feedback loop is directly relevant to panic disorder. Second, the facial feedback hypothesis has clinical implications for depression. Behavioural activation, a core component of cognitive behavioural therapy for depression, encourages patients to engage in behaviours associated with positive effect even before the mood improves. This is consistent with the James-Lange idea that changing behaviour and bodily state can influence emotional experience. Third, the theory underpins the rationale for somatic therapies and body-based interventions in trauma, where working with bodily sensations is used as a route to emotional processing. Remember, the James-Lange theory is clinically relevant to panic disorder, behavioural activation in depression, and body-based approaches to trauma therapy. Now, let's test your recall. I will read out 5 exam-style questions. After each one, I will pause for 10 seconds so you can attempt them before hearing the answer. Question 1. What are the 4 components of emotional response? Physiological, cognitive, behavioural and subjective components. Question 2. Who proposed the James-Lange theory and when? William James in 1884 and Carl Lange in 1885, independently and around the same time. Question 3. According to the James-Lange theory, what is an emotion? The perception of physiological changes in the body. Bodily changes come first, and the emotional feeling follows. Question 4. What is the facial feedback hypothesis, and how does it relate to the James-Lange theory? The facial feedback hypothesis proposes that facial muscle activity influences emotional experience. It supports the James-Lange idea that bodily changes can shape the felt emotion. Question 5. Name 2 clinical applications of the James-Lange theory. The theory is relevant to the physical symptom cycle in panic disorder and to the rationale for behavioural activation in the treatment of depression. Let's summarise what we have learnt today. Emotional responses involve 4 components: physiological, cognitive, behavioural, and subjective. The internal organs, collectively called the viscera, contribute significantly to the physiological component. The James-Lange theory, proposed independently by William James and Carl Lange in 1884 and 1885, argues that emotions are the perception of bodily changes. We are afraid because we tremble, the body responds first, and the felt emotion follows. Supporting evidence includes the effects of adrenaline on emotional intensity, the facial feedback hypothesis, and embodied cognition research. Key criticisms include the non-specificity and slowness of visceral responses, the failure of artificial arousal to produce genuine emotion, and spinal cord injury evidence. A useful way to remember this for the exam is to think about the L in Lange. L stands for lag, and so the emotion lags behind the body. Clinically, the theory informs our understanding of panic disorder, behavioural activation in depression, and body-based trauma therapies. In the next episode, we will explore the Cannon-Barth theory, developed directly in response to the shortcomings of the James-Lange model. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of MRCpsych on the Go Revision Essentials. I hope this episode helped to move your revision forward. If you have any questions or just want to continue the discussion, you can find me on LinkedIn at MRCpsych on the Go, spelled MRCPsych on the Go. This podcast is about making revision accessible. If you found it useful, liking and sharing it with others helps the goal more than anything else. That's it for today. I'm Dr. Alapis Ehrlicher, and as always, keep revising on the go.